stood at the back of the room and watched. That was his job: watch, observe, and protect. He had done this work for 3 years now, ever since he left the Korean Special Forces. The money was good, the work was quiet, and most importantly, nobody asked him about his past. The diplomatic starship Eternal Accord was the largest vessel had ever seen. It stretched for almost 2 kilometers, with halls made of white metal and windows that showed the endless black of space. The ship belonged to no one nation and no one species. It was neutral ground, built for meetings between worlds that did not trust each other. Today, that meant humans and had read the briefing files 100 times. The Empire controlled over 300 star systems. They had existed for tens of thousands of years. Their people lived for centuries, sometimes longer. They were tall, with skin that ranged from pale blue to deep violet, and their eyes glowed like polished silver. They moved slowly, spoke carefully, and thought of humans the way humans thought of insects. 40 years ago, humanity had discovered faster than light travel. 40 years ago, they had stumbled into a galaxy full of ancient civilizations. And in those 40 years, humanity had learned one painful truth. To the rest of the universe, they were children, worse than children. They were animals who had somehow learned to build spaceships. Did not care about politics. He cared about doing his job and getting paid. But even he felt the weight of eyes on him as he stood in the corner of the grand hall. The alien guards looked at him like he was dirt on their clean floor. He was part of a team of 6 humans assigned to protect the Earth delegation. 6 humans against 200 guards. It was almost funny. The had allowed them aboard as a courtesy, nothing more. If anything went wrong, and his team would be useless. But orders were orders. The grand hall was filled with long tables covered in food that could not name. Nobles sat in chairs that seemed to float above the floor. They wore robes of silver and gold, and they spoke in voices so soft that could barely hear them. At the far end of the room sat the emperor himself, a being so old that his skin had turned almost white. His eyes were closed, but knew he was awake. The emperor was always awake. Beside the emperor sat his 3 daughters. The first 2 were older, their faces hard and cold like their father. But the 3rd daughter was different. Princess was younger than her sisters, though young for us still meant hundreds of years old. Her skin was a soft violet, and her silver eyes moved constantly around the room. She did not look bored like the others. She looked curious. Caught her watching him twice during the dinner. The first time he looked away quickly. The second time he held her gaze for a moment before turning back to his work. He did not know what she wanted. He did not care. His job was to watch for threats, not to make friends with alien princesses. The dinner lasted for 4 hours. His legs ached from standing, and his stomach growled from the smell of food he could not eat. When the guests finally began to leave, he let out a slow breath and relaxed his shoulders. His commander, a woman named Park, walked over to him. She was 10 years older than and had twice his experience. Her face was always calm, always controlled. "Anything to report?" she asked quietly. "Nothing," said, "but I don't like the guard rotation." Raised an eyebrow. "What about it?" "It changed 3 times during dinner. Small changes. A guard moved from the east door to the west door. Another one disappeared for 20 minutes and came back. Could be nothing. Could be something." Was quiet for a moment. Then she shook her head. "It's their ship, their security. We're guests here, don't go looking for trouble." "I'm not looking for trouble. I'm looking for patterns." "Same thing," said. She patted his shoulder and walked away. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow is the treaty signing, big day." Watched her go. He knew she was right. He was probably seeing shadows where there were none. But something felt wrong. He could feel it in his bones, the same way he had felt it before that mission on Colony 7. The mission that still woke him up at night, covered in sweat, hearing screams that existed only in his memory. He pushed the thought away and walked back to his quarters. The hallway was empty and quiet. His footsteps echoed on the metal floor. He was almost at his room when he heard a voice behind him. "Human." Turned, Princess stood at the end of the hallway alone. No guards, no servants, just her, wrapped in a robe of deep blue that made her violet skin glow. He bowed his head slightly. "Your Highness." She walked toward him slowly. Her steps made no sound. When she stopped, she was close enough that could see the faint lines of light that moved beneath her skin, bioluminescent patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat. "I have a question," she said. Her voice was soft, almost musical. "Do humans truly feel no fear of death?" Blinked, it was not the question he had expected. "We feel it," he said carefully. "We feel it very much." "Then why do you act as if you don't? Your species lives for such a short time, 80 years, 90 if you are lucky, and yet you throw yourselves into danger without hesitation. My tutors say it is because you are too stupid to understand the consequences, but I do not think that is true." Thought about the question. He thought about Colony 7. He thought about the children he could not save and the faces he could not forget. "We feel the fear," he said finally, "but we act anyway, because if we waited until we weren't afraid, we would never act at all." Princess studied him for a long moment. Her silver eyes were unreadable. Then she nodded slowly, as if he had confirmed something she already suspected. "Thank you for your honesty," she said. "Most beings lie to me. They tell me what they think I want to hear." "I'm not smart enough to lie well," said, "so I don't bother." The corner of her mouth twitched. It might have been a smile. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing around a corner as silently as she had arrived. Stood alone in the hallway for a long time. Something was wrong on this ship. He could feel it more strongly than ever. And somehow, he knew that Princess could feel it too. Tomorrow was the treaty signing. Big day, had said. Had a feeling she was more right than she knew. The grand hall looked different in the morning light. Artificial sunlight poured through the massive windows, filling the room with a golden glow that made everything seem peaceful. Did not feel peaceful. He had not slept well, and the feeling of wrongness in his gut had only grown stronger. He stood at the back of the hall with the rest of the human security team. Commander stood beside him, her eyes scanning the crowd. She had listened to his concerns again this morning, and again she had told him to stay calm, but noticed that she was watching the guards more closely than before. The treaty signing ceremony was the most important diplomatic event in human history. If everything went well, Earth would become an official ally of the Empire. Trade routes would open. Technology would be shared. Humanity would finally have a place at the galactic table. If everything went well. The hall was packed with beings from a dozen different species, nobles in their floating chairs, human diplomats in their best suits, ambassadors from other empires who had come to watch history being made. The air was thick with tension and hope and fear. At the front of the room, a long table had been set up for the signing. The human ambassador, a tall woman with gray hair and tired eyes, sat on one side. Emperor sat on the other, his ancient face showing no emotion at all. Behind them stood their guards and advisors. Princess stood behind her father, dressed in formal robes of white and silver. Found himself watching her without meaning to. She looked calm on the surface, but her hands were clasped together too tightly. She was nervous, maybe even afraid. The ceremony began with speeches. Long, boring speeches about friendship between worlds and the dawn of a new era. Had heard 100 speeches like this. He stopped listening and focused on watching. The guards stood in perfect formation around the room. They did not move. They did not blink. They were like statues carved from stone, but one of them was different. A guard near the east wall kept shifting his weight from one foot to the other. His eyes were not scanning the crowd like the others. They were fixed on one point. Followed his gaze. The guard was staring at Princess. The feeling of wrongness exploded into certainty. His hand moved toward his weapon, but he stopped himself. He had no proof. He was a guest on this ship, a human among aliens who already thought his kind were paranoid animals. If he was wrong, he would start an incident that could destroy the treaty. But if he was right, he looked at Commander. She was watching the speeches, not the guards. There was no time to explain, no time to convince her. He would have to trust his instincts. The speeches ended. The ambassador and the emperor stood up to sign the treaty. The room fell silent. Every eye was on the table where history was about to be made. Every eye except. He watched the guard by the east wall. He watched him reach slowly inside his uniform. He watched him pull out a weapon that glowed with blue plasma energy. Time seemed to slow down. The guard raised the weapon. He aimed at Princess. His finger moved toward the trigger. Did not think. His body moved before his mind could catch up. He pushed through the crowd, shoving aside nobles and human diplomats. Someone shouted. Someone screamed. He did not hear them. He heard nothing but the blood pounding in his ears. 15 meters. That was the distance between him and the princess. 15 meters of empty space that seemed to stretch forever. The guard fired. Threw himself forward. He crashed into Princess and wrapped his arms around her, spinning his body so that his back faced the blast. For one frozen moment, they hung in the air together, his human body shielding her alien form. Then the plasma bolt hit him. Pain, more pain than had ever felt in his life. It was like being burned and frozen and torn apart all at the same time. He felt his flesh cooking, his bones cracking, his organs failing. He smelled his own body burning. He hit the ground hard. Princess was beneath him unharmed. He had done it. He had saved her. That was enough. The world became chaos. Guards rushed forward and tackled the assassin. Diplomats screamed and ran for the exits. Medics pushed through the crowd, shouting in their musical language. But heard none of it. He was floating in a sea of darkness and pain. He felt hands grabbing him, turning him over. He saw Princess' face above him, her silver eyes wide with shock and something else. Something that looked like grief. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you do that?" Tried to speak, but no words came out. Only blood. The medics surrounded him. They scanned his body with devices that beeped and flashed. They spoke to each other in quick, urgent voices. Then they stopped. They looked at each other with expressions of hopelessness. "There is nothing we can do," one of them said. "The damage is too severe. No being can survive a direct plasma hit." Princess clutched his hand. Her fingers were cold against his burning skin. "No," she said. "No, you have to save him. He saved me. You have to save him." But the medics just shook their heads. Felt his heart slowing. Each beat came slower than the last. The pain was fading now, replaced by a cold numbness that spread through his body. This was death. He had seen it enough times to recognize it. He thought about his family back on Earth. His mother, who had cried when he joined the military. His little sister, who sent him messages every week even though he rarely answered. He wished he had answered more. He thought about Colony 7, about the faces of the people he could not save. Maybe now he would see them again. Maybe now he could finally say sorry. His heart stopped. The medics stepped back. "He is gone," one of them announced. Princess did not let go of his hand. Tears ran down her violet cheeks, glowing faintly in the artificial light. She had known this human for less than a day. She did not even know his name, but he had given his life for hers without a moment of hesitation. The hall fell silent, and humans alike stared at the dead man on the floor. The treaty lay unsigned on the table, forgotten. And then, 47 seconds after his heart stopped, gasped. His eyes flew open. His chest heaved as air rushed into his lungs. His hand squeezed Princess so hard that she cried out in surprise. The medics stumbled backward in shock. The crowd gasped. Even Emperor rose from his chair, his ancient eyes wide with something that might have been fear. Coughed blood and looked up at the ceiling. His chest was still a ruin of burned flesh and broken bone, But even as he watched, the flesh was knitting back together. The bones were shifting into place. His body was healing itself in ways that should have been impossible. He turned his head and saw Princess staring at him. Her silver eyes were full of wonder and terror. What are you?" she whispered. Did not have an answer. He did not understand what was happening any more than she did. All he knew was that he had died, and now he was alive. And the entire alien court had just watched it happen. Woke to the sound of whispers. Alien voices speaking in a language he did not understand, their words quick and nervous. He kept his eyes closed and tried to remember where he was. Pain, he remembered pain, and fire and darkness. He opened his eyes. He was lying on a metal table in a room filled with strange machines. The walls were white and curved, and the ceiling glowed with soft blue light. Medics stood around him in a half-circle, their violet and blue faces twisted with expressions he could not read. One of them noticed he was awake and jumped backward with a sharp cry. The others turned to look at him, and the whispers stopped. Tried to sit up. His body screamed in protest. Every muscle ached, every bone felt like it had been broken and put back together wrong. But he forced himself upright anyway, gritting his teeth against the pain. He looked down at his chest. The wound was still there, a massive crater of burned and healing flesh. But it was smaller than before. The edges were pink with new skin, growing inward like water filling a hole. "How long?" he asked. His voice came out as a croak. The medics looked at each other. None of them wanted to speak. Finally, one of them stepped forward. She was older than the others, her blue skin marked with lines of silver that showed her age. 14 hours, she said. "You have been unconscious for 14 hours, we thought. We were certain you would not wake again." Nodded slowly. 14 hours. He had been dead for 47 seconds and unconscious for 14 hours, and somehow he was still alive. "The princess," he said, "is she safe?" The medic's eyes widened slightly. Of all the questions he could ask, that was the one he chose. "She is unharmed. You saved her life." Let out a breath he did not know he was holding. Good, that was good. That meant it was worth it. The door to the medical room slid open, and a tall in armor stepped inside. Commander, the head of the Imperial Guard, recognized her from the briefing files. She was one of the most decorated soldiers in the Empire, with over 2,000 years of service. She looked at he was a bomb that might explode at any moment. "The Emperor commands your presence," she said. Her voice was cold and hard. "You will come with me." "He can barely stand," the old medic protested. "He needs more time to heal." "The Emperor does not wait," said. "If he cannot walk, we will drag him." Swung his legs off the table and forced himself to his feet. The room spun around him, and he almost fell. But he grabbed the edge of the table and steadied himself. "I can walk," he said. Studied him for a moment. Something flickered in her silver eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Then she turned and walked out of the room, expecting him to follow. The journey to the throne room took forever. His legs shook with every step, and more than once he had to lean against the wall to catch his breath. Walked ahead of him without looking back. Others stopped and stared as they passed, their whispers following like a shadow. The human who died and came back. The monster, the miracle. Finally, they reached the throne room. The massive doors swung open and stepped inside. The room was enormous, bigger than any space had ever seen. The ceiling was so high that it disappeared into shadow, and the walls were lined with statues of ancient heroes. At the far end of the room sat Emperor on a throne that seemed to be made of solid light. And between and the Emperor stood hundreds of nobles. They packed the room from wall to wall, all of them staring at the human who had somehow cheated death. Walked forward. His legs wanted to give out. His vision blurred at the edges. But he kept walking, one step at a time, until he stood at the foot of the Emperor's throne. Emperor looked down at him with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. His face showed no emotion at all. "Kneel," Commander said. His knees were already weak. Kneeling was almost a relief. He lowered himself to the floor and bowed his head. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence pressed down on like a physical weight. Then a new voice cut through the quiet. High Priest stepped forward from the crowd. He was ancient even by standards, his skin almost transparent and his eyes burning with religious fervor. "This creature is an abomination," he declared. "No natural being can survive what he survived. He must be destroyed before he spreads his corruption." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some voices agreed, others were uncertain. "He saved the princess's life," another voice said. Looked up and saw Princess pushing through the crowd. She walked to stand beside him, her silver eyes flashing with anger. "He threw himself in front of a plasma bolt meant for me. How can you call him an abomination?" "Precisely because he survived," shouted. "Humans are known to be weak, fragile, short-lived. For one of them to heal from wounds that would kill any civilized being, it is unnatural, it is wrong." "It is biology," a calm voice said. The old medic from the medical room had followed them to the throne room. She stepped forward and bowed to the Emperor. "Your Majesty, I have studied the human's physiology. What happened to him is not magic or corruption. It is simply the result of human biology." The Emperor raised one thin eyebrow. "Explain." The medic took a deep breath. "Human bodies are redundant. They have backup systems for their backup systems. 2 lungs, 2 kidneys, a heart that can restart itself under certain conditions, and their cells. Their cells have a healing capacity we have never seen before. When the human was struck by the plasma bolt, his body absorbed the energy and distributed it across his cellular structure. It should have killed him. It did kill him, but his body refused to accept death." "That is impossible," said. "It should be impossible," the medic agreed. "But I have seen the data. I have seen his wounds close themselves. Human biology it is terrifying, Your Majesty. They are not the weak creatures we believe them to be." The throne room erupted in noise. Nobles shouting at each other, guards moving to keep order, priests calling for death. The chaos was overwhelming. Then Emperor raised one hand, and the room fell silent instantly. He looked down with those ancient, unreadable eyes. "You are injured," he said. "You can barely stand. You should be dead. And yet when Commander came for you, your first words were to ask about my daughter's safety." He paused. "Why?" Thought about the question. He thought about all the complicated answers he could give, about duty and honor and redemption. But in the end, the truth was simple. "She was in danger," he said. "I could help, so I did." The Emperor studied him for a long moment. "You will explain more," he said finally. "You will explain how a creature of mere decades, a creature who had known my daughter for less than a single day, chooses to die for someone he does not know." Looked up at the Emperor. He looked at Princess standing beside him. He looked at the hundreds of alien faces staring at him with fear and wonder and hatred. "I will try," he said, "but I am not sure you will understand the answer." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Try anyway." The questioning lasted for 6 hours. They moved from the throne room to a smaller chamber, one with walls of dark metal and a single floating chair in the center. He sat in that chair while Emperor's advisors circled around him like sharks, asking the same questions over and over in different ways. "Why did you save the princess? What do you want in return? What is humanity planning? Why did you really do it?" Answered as best he could. He did not want anything. Humanity was not planning anything. He saved the princess because she was in danger and he could help. That was all. They did not believe him. "Every action has a purpose," one advisor said. He was a thin, pale creature with eyes like chips of ice. "Every choice is made with the expectation of reward. You cannot expect us to believe that you threw away your life for nothing." "I did not throw away my life," said. His voice was tired, his wounds still ached. "I made a choice. The princess would have died if I did nothing, so I did something. But you did die, the advisor pressed. Your heart stopped. You were clinically dead for 47 seconds. You had no way of knowing you would survive. Therefore, you made your choice with the full belief that you would not live to see any reward. This makes no sense. Almost laughed. Maybe it does not make sense to you, but it makes sense to me. The advisors looked at each other with expressions of frustration. They had been trained in diplomacy and politics for hundreds of years. They knew how to read people, how to find the hidden motives behind every action, but had no hidden motives. He was exactly what he appeared to be, and that confused them more than any lie could. Finally, Emperor raised his hand, and the advisors fell silent. "Leave us," he said. The advisors bowed and filed out of the room. The door closed behind them, leaving alone with the ancient emperor. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The emperor studied with those eyes that had seen thousands of years of history, stared back, too tired to be afraid. "My advisors believe you are a spy," the emperor said at last. "They believe your sacrifice was a trick designed to earn our trust." "And what do you believe?" asked. The emperor was silent for a moment. "I believe you are telling the truth. I have lived for 12,000 years, human. I have seen every kind of lie, every kind of deception. You are not lying. You genuinely risked your life for my daughter, expecting nothing in return." He paused. "I find this troubling." "Troubling." "We live for thousands of years. Every choice we make, we consider the consequences across centuries. We do not act on impulse. We do not sacrifice ourselves without careful calculation of the costs and benefits. The idea of throwing away even a single year of life is horrifying to us." The emperor leaned forward slightly. "Your species lives for less than a century. Every year is precious. Every moment is irreplaceable. And yet you waste those moments on strangers without a second thought. How? Why?" Thought about the question. It was the same question Princess had asked him that night in the hallway, but deeper, more desperate. "Maybe because we do not have time to waste," he said slowly. "You have thousands of years to think about your choices. We have decades. If we stopped to calculate every risk, we would never do anything. So we learn to trust our instincts. We learn to act first and think later." "That sounds like madness." "Maybe it is," admitted. "But it is also freedom. You are so afraid of losing your long lives that you become prisoners to that fear. We are so aware that our lives are short that we stop being afraid of losing them." The emperor was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter than before. "My daughter tells me that you carry guilt, that you spoke of a mission where you failed to save people. Is this true?" His chest tightened. He had not expected this. "Yes." "Tell me about it." He did not want to. The memories of Colony 7 were locked away in the darkest part of his mind, and he did not like to take them out. But the emperor was watching him with those ancient eyes, and somehow knew that this question mattered more than all the others. "3 years ago," he said, "I was stationed on a colony world called New. There was an evacuation. Pirates were coming, and we had to get the civilians out before they arrived. I was in charge of one of the evacuation points." He paused. The memories were flooding back now, sharp and painful. "There were too many people and not enough ships. We loaded as many as we could, but there were still hundreds left when the pirates arrived. I had to make a choice. Stay and fight or leave with the ships that were full. I chose to stay. And I failed." His voice was flat. "The pirates overwhelmed us. I watched people die, people I was supposed to protect, children, families. I fought until I could not fight anymore, and then everything went dark. When I woke up, I was on a medical ship. The colony was gone. Everyone who stayed behind was dead. Everyone except me." The emperor watched him without speaking. "I spent 2 years asking myself why I survived," continued. "Why I lived when so many others died. I never found an answer. But yesterday, when I saw that assassin pointing his weapon at the princess, I did not think about any of that. I just thought not again. I would not fail again. I would not watch someone die when I could save them. He looked up at the Emperor. That is why I did it, not for politics, not for reward, because I could not live with myself if I did nothing. The door to the chamber opened and Princess stepped inside. She had been listening, realized. She had heard everything. She walked toward him slowly, her silver eyes bright with emotion. "You blame yourself," she said, "for something that was not your fault. It was my responsibility. You cannot save everyone." "I know," his voice cracked slightly, "but I can try every time. I can always try." Stopped in front of him. She reached out and placed her hand on his chest, over the wound that was still healing. Her touch was cool and gentle. "My tutors were wrong about humans," she said quietly. "They said you were reckless because you do not value life. But that is backwards. You are reckless because you value life too much. You cannot stand to watch it be destroyed, even if saving it costs you everything." Did not know what to say. No one had ever understood him like that before. The Emperor rose from his seat. His ancient face showed the first hint of emotion had seen, something that might have been respect or wonder. "You will rest now," the Emperor said. "Tomorrow you will appear before the full court again. There are decisions to be made." He paused at the door. "You have given me much to think about, human. Perhaps we have been too quick to judge your species." He left. Princess stayed behind. "Thank you," she said softly, "for saving my life, and for being honest with my father. He does not hear honesty very often." Managed a tired smile. "I told you, I am not smart enough to lie well." She smiled back. It was the first real smile he had seen from her. "Rest," she said. "Tomorrow will be important." She left him alone in the chamber, leaned back in the floating chair and closed his eyes. For the first time in 3 years, the memories of Colony 7 did not hurt quite as much. Maybe he could not change the past, but maybe, just maybe, he could build a better future. Tomorrow would tell. The Grand Throne Room was filled with more beings than had ever seen in one place. Nobles in their finest robes stood shoulder to shoulder with ambassadors from a dozen different species. Human diplomats clustered together near the entrance, their faces tight with worry. No one knew why the Emperor had called this assembly. No one knew what would happen next. Stood at the back of the room with Commander and the rest of the human security team. His wounds had healed overnight, leaving behind only faint scars on his chest. The medics had watched the process with a mixture of fascination and fear. "You should not be standing," whispered. "You should be in a hospital bed." "I am fine," said. It was mostly true. His body felt strange, different somehow, but he was strong enough to stand, strong enough to face whatever came next. The great doors at the front of the room swung open, and Emperor entered. He walked slowly, his ancient body moving with careful dignity. Behind him came his daughters and his advisors, followed by Commander and her guards. The crowd fell silent as the Emperor took his place on the throne. He sat there for a moment, looking out at the assembled beings with those unreadable eyes. "Bring forward the human," he said. Felt every eye in the room turn toward him. He took a deep breath and began to walk. The crowd parted before him like water, leaving a clear path to the throne. He stopped at the foot of the steps and knelt, bowing his head as he had done before. "Rise," the Emperor said. Stood, he looked up at the ancient ruler of 300 star systems and waited. "2 days ago," the Emperor began, "an assassin tried to kill my daughter. The attack came from within our own court, from those who oppose the treaty with humanity. They believed that humans were a threat to our empire. They believed that your species was too unpredictable, too dangerous to be allowed into our alliance." A murmur ran through the crowd. The Emperor raised his hand for silence. "They were right to be afraid," he continued. "But they were wrong about the reason. A human with less than a century of life threw himself in front of a plasma bolt meant for my daughter. He did this knowing that he would die. He did this without any expectation of reward. He did this simply because he saw someone in danger and chose to help. The emperor paused and looked at, with an expression that was almost warm. We have lived for thousands of years. We have conquered star systems and built empires that span the galaxy. But in all that time, we have forgotten something important. We have forgotten what it means to risk everything for a single moment. We have become so focused on preserving our long lives that we have stopped truly living them. He gestured to one of his advisors, who stepped forward carrying a small wooden box. This human reminded us of what we have lost: his sacrifice, his courage, his willingness to die for a stranger. These things are not weaknesses, they are strengths. They are what make humanity dangerous, yes, but they are also what make humanity worthy of respect. The advisor opened the box. Inside, resting on a cushion of blue velvet, was a medallion made of silver and gold. It glowed with an inner light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "The crest of," the emperor said, "the highest honor our empire can bestow upon a non. It has not been awarded in over 6,000 years. Today, I give it to you, in recognition of your service to the empire and to my family." Stared at the medallion. He did not know what to say. He had not done what he did for honor or reward. He had done it because it was the right thing to do. The emperor seemed to understand his silence. "You do not need to accept this for yourself," he said. "Accept it for your people. Let it be a symbol of what humanity can be at its best." Slowly reached out and took the medallion. It was warm in his hand, and the light pulsed faster at his touch. "Thank you," he said. His voice was rough. "I do not deserve this, but I will try to be worthy of it." The emperor nodded. Then he turned to address the crowd. "Let it be known throughout the empire that the treaty with humanity will proceed, not as an agreement between masters and servants, but as a true alliance between equals. Any species that produces individuals like is worthy of our respect and our friendship." The room exploded with noise, and humans alike began to cheer and shout. Some voices were angry, protesting the decision, but they were drowned out by the wave of approval. Stood in the middle of it all, holding the crest of and trying to understand what had just happened. A day ago, he had been a nobody, a former soldier running from his past. Now he was, what? A hero, a symbol. A hand touched his arm. He turned and saw Princess standing beside him. Her silver eyes were bright and she was smiling. "You look confused," she said. "I am confused," he admitted. "I am just a soldier. I am not supposed to be this." "None of us are supposed to be anything," said. "We become what we become through our choices. You chose to save me. You chose to be honest with my father. You chose to be brave when it would have been easier to be afraid." She paused. "Those choices made you what you are now, a symbol of what your species can be." Looked at the medallion in his hand. He thought about Colony 7, about the people he could not save. He thought about the night in the hallway when it asked him about fear and death. He thought about the moment when he saw the assassin raise his weapon and made his choice. "I do not feel like a hero," he said quietly. "Heroes never do," replied. "That is what makes them heroes." The ceremony continued around them. Diplomats made speeches. Nobles offered congratulations. The human ambassador came forward to Sheikh's hand, tears of relief in her eyes. The treaty would be signed. Humanity would have its place at the galactic table. But barely noticed any of it. He was watching Princess as she moved through the crowd, speaking with guests and accepting their well wishes. She moved with grace and confidence, but every few moments she would glance back at him, making sure he was still there. Later, when the ceremony had ended and the crowd had begun to thin, returned to his side. "I have a request," she said, "one that you can refuse if you wish." "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "I would like you to stay, not as a diplomat or a symbol, but as my personal guard. It is a position of great honor in our court, and it has never been held by a non. You would be the first." Blinked. Of all the things he had expected her to say, this was not one of them. "Why?" he asked. "Your guards are the best in the Empire. You do not need me." "You are right," she said. "I do not need you for protection, but I want you here because you see things differently than we do. You act differently, you think differently, and I believe that is exactly what this court needs." She paused. "What I need?" Thought about Earth. He thought about his family, his sister who sent him messages every week. He thought about the life he had left behind and the future he could build here. He thought about how, for the first time in 3 years, he did not feel lost. "Okay," he said, "I will stay." His face lit up with a smile that was brighter than any star. "Thank you. You will not regret this." He was not sure about that. He was not sure about anything. But as he stood in the throne room of an alien empire, holding a medallion that had not been awarded in 6,000 years, he realized something important. He had spent 3 years running from his past, running from the guilt of Colony 7, running from the belief that he was a failure who did not deserve to live. But maybe survival was not a punishment. Maybe it was a second chance. Placed her hand on his arm and smiled at him. "You humans burn so briefly," she said softly, repeating the words she had spoken before. "But you burn so bright." Looked at her, at this alien princess who had changed his life in ways he could never have imagined. "We do our best," he said. And for the first time in a very long time, he believed it.